So I heard recently that the BAFTAs, which is kind of like the UK equivalent of the Oscars, announced that they were excluding AI-generated performances from like acting categories to protect human creativity, is what they said. But as AI-generated performances improve, do you think we are going to need separate spaces where human creativity doesn't compete with AI, and so like separate awards categories almost? Or do you think that the creative industries are going to have to adapt just like every other industry?
Wow, that's a very interesting question.
I think that AI, for the most part, will be used as tools by humans to create in the same way that they've used tons of different tools over time. So could I imagine like a category for a like purely AI created film? And like there are a bunch of AI film festivals, including some that we sponsor, that are kind of sort of popping up all over the place. But I think when it comes to like premium entertainment, which is really the space that we're talking about, I don't think you'll need separate categories because it's going to be humans using tools in the same way that humans have always used tools.
Interesting. Romy, do you have a perspective?
I could see a category for best AI created something. I think the creators are going to hate it, but I could see that happening down the road.
Interesting.
But who knows?
I also imagine, I think the amount that AI is going to be used will probably increase over the coming years, and like some of these questions might be quaint depending on where things are 5-10 years from now. But I think it's probably, well, at least it may not be black and white that this is AI created, this is human. There might be more and more scenes where AI is used in place of human for that scene, so you don't have to retake, and things where it'll be, I think, potentially more hybrid. And so because of that, you might not have a lot of just purely AI movies, but it might be more of a middle ground.
Yeah. We've seen some quite strong reactions to AI-generated music when it's coming to using deceased artists. And I know ElevenLabs, you guys have obviously worked with, not on music, but worked with Epic Games for including Darth Vader within Fortnite, and had James Earl Jones's voice, right? He's obviously died. And it's very adaptive and very cool. You can chat with Darth Vader. Who doesn't want to do that? Alex, I'd really love to understand, like, first of all, how did that opportunity come about? And second, what additional considerations, both legally and ethically, do you think about when you're dealing with a deceased artist?
It's a great question. So we powered within Fortnite. They had a Darth Vader character voiced by James Earl Jones that players could have dynamic conversations with. In that case, we were just the voice provider,
right?
Essentially, we were just a voice provider, and total consent and support was given by James Earl Jones' estate. We talked about the 3 C's. I kind of mentioned them earlier: control, compensation, and consent. All of those there, and like, who is ElevenLabs to tell James Earl Jones' estate, like, you can't use our technology in that way? Like, if they want to participate for whatever slew of reasons they want to. And so we ensure that, again, you have those 3 C's, that everybody's fully on board with all the terms and the guardrails that are in place. But we do want to empower engaging experiences like that, and we do want to allow individual talent, or if it's a deceased talent, their estate, to make decisions about how their voice and their likeness can be used.
Okay. Jared, how ready or useful is existing copyright and IP law to protect performers from, not in the case of this, because obviously you got all the consents, but unauthorized use of their personality or their name, image, and likeness, both deceased and living?
So copyright and kind of traditional IP law can't do a lot as far as the voice itself, and in kind of the law developed around impersonations, things like that. But while a recorded song or a recorded movie or something that's a recording of the voice can be protected by copyright, but then use of the voice itself outside of that recording is beyond the scope of traditional copyright. AI, I think it's a little more complex if you're using recordings for the training, but ultimately the voice itself isn't the expression that the copyright's protecting. It's the kind of the mechanism for expressing that. So, copyright isn't really a square fit. There are increasingly rights of publicity and things that are created to protect that kind of the association of that voice with the person. And so those can be mechanisms for protecting it where it's beyond traditional.
And are they fit for purpose, do you think, at the current state? Because obviously rights of publicity have been around for a very long time, but certainly way before generative AI became so mainstream.
Yeah, I think so for one thing, they're not all consistent. And so whether they have any rights for, deceased people or, the extent of those rights and the contours of the different laws aren't all the same. I think they're probably the kind of the best legal framework we have now, but they probably need to be updated and looked at and, their implementation considered as technology's changing.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, I would characterize it as woefully inadequate in that we don't have a right of publicity. So we have something similar, but it's by far not enough. So I think that's what's currently being lobbied by all the different unions is we need some proper rights of publicity to protect our image. Moving into sort of ethics, Alex and Romy, how much of your internal discussions when you're talking about AI is actually about ethics rather than the law?
So ethics are first, I think, before the law. From my perspective, we should be ethical first. And even if the law lets us do something, sometimes it's just a bad look to kind of squeeze your use case into what you could possibly do, even though it's just the wrong thing to do. So huge. And I feel that I preach it all the time. And it's hard to, as a lawyer or as the lawyer, to say, don't do that, and you get an answer back why the law lets me. It's the ick factor. And what do you think this is going to look like to an external party? And it's important for us as lawyers to explain and kind of talk through what happens if you follow the law, but too close to the letter of the law and not necessarily ethically. So very important.
Alex?
I think one of the things I love most about my job is that every decision is a byproduct of like 50 different inputs, and very significant input obviously is what the law says, but ethics, comms, reputational concerns, how the different audiences and constituencies that we serve will react to something, like all of those are just as important as legal. And so, we have big ambitions as a company. We want to do things the right way, and we want we want all the companies in the world to feel safe, secure, and comfortable working with ElevenLabs. And so I think considering ethics as a really important input among those many inputs is something we do with every decision.
Okay.
I'll add also, just from an outside counsel's perspective, if these legal disputes, even if you're absolutely on the right side of the law, if these become disputes and they go to court, then you're going to go before a judge and a jury and have to kind of tell your story. And acting with ethics first, with kind of strategy of trying to do the right thing, I think is almost as important or more important than the legal technicalities about this. Because if you are maybe technically following the law, but flirting or going outside of what its policy was for, or even just doing things that a judge or jury are not going to be happy about, you're putting yourself at a lot more risk. And it's not just about checking the box that you're following the law, but thinking through what you're doing from a total business strategy.
Okay. And moving on to labeling, how important do you think labeling and disclosure is, and how practical, how challenging is it to do in, for all these sort of generated outputs? How difficult is that going to be to do? Romy?
Very difficult, but I don't know. So if you're not putting out content that is only created by AI, but does have a human in the loop, is there a need for it, right? And so I think the more human and the less AI, you don't need a label. And so we haven't really gotten there as a company because we're very cautious about what we put out. And so I haven't seen it, but it's hard, and it's not. It doesn't look pretty, right? It doesn't look cool. So that's the other part of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a perspective, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think provenance and people's ability to know what's AI and what's not is going to become increasingly important as the world is flooded with more and more AI-generated content, and we. Whether it's metadata, fingerprinting, other types of encryption, like we do that with all of our outputs, so people are able to tell if something is AI generated or not. We also have a classifier on our website where if you run any audio through it, it'll tell you whether or not it was created with ElevenLabs. So we want people to be able to tell if something is AI generated. At the same time, part of our value proposition as a company, and sort of where we started, is being able to generate very human-like voices that people engage with comfortably the same way that they engage with people. And if at the beginning of every one of those engagements there was audio that said you are talking to an AI-generated voice, it would undermine a huge part of the value that we provide. So there is a balance between making somebody being able to take a piece of content and learn whether it's AI generated or not, and having a label on every piece of content. And we are huge proponents of the former, and the latter is just pretty tough.
Yeah, but that is pretty much what Europe is wanting to do, right? Is having that kind of affirmative label up front. If you're listening to audio, getting a little at the very start to say you're listening to something that's generated. But I think my biggest issue with that is it's okay when it's purely AI generated. That's kind of easy to label that. But if it's not purely, it's AI assisted, or if there's some elements that are AI generated, how do you label that, like partially AI generated? And where that's almost misleading in itself, isn't it? Because it kind of gives a wrong impression of how much is labeled or used.
We're
AI.
working through it.
Right.
We don't know yet. We'll see.
Okay. I'm going to have one more question, then we have some time for questions. 5 years from now, what is one debate about AI that we're having today that will be completely settled or irrelevant?
I don't think, does any debate get settled? Like, I would love to be able to point to something, but I think although the sort of data surrounding a lot of these debates will evolve, I think that, and I think adoption is obviously, not a brilliant thought that adoption is going to increase dramatically in a 5-year period. I think some of the same discussions we're having today, there are going to always be people on both sides of.
Okay. Jared and Romy, anything?
I agree from kind of the policy perspective of it, and people trying to figure out what the right solution is. I do think because there's going to be so much more adoption and so much more advances in AI, there's going to be a lot of practical, just agreements or ways that industries adopt and adapt. And because of that, things that we think needs either regulation or a solution, I think will organically kind of work itself out, maybe not in the perfect way, but in a way that works. And so, 5 years from now, the sky won't have fallen and things will continue to, you'll have new things being created. I think AI will do things we're not prepared for yet. But I think a lot of good will come for that, for the media industry generally.
Good. Romy?
I'm an optimist.
So I think jobs, what jobs are going away? Are they going away? we're all curious. What is going to happen to, you know, a rote type of job versus a creative type of job? And we just we can't predict it. Everyone thinks they know the answer, knows the answer, but we just don't know what is going to happen to the job market. So I think that's going to get solved. Okay. And I hope it gets solved. And our skill sets will evolve with them.
Great. Okay, we do have some time for questions. If you could please just go to the microphone just in the middle of the room there, and also just to disclose this is being recorded. So your question will be recorded as well.
And you consent.
Great session. My name is Rex Lee, and I'm with Pod TV and CyberTalk TV on Roku. Regarding Nick, you brought up rights for artists. What I don't understand is why the entertainment industry hasn't done what college sports has with NIL. And they've set the precedents for name, likeness, and image. That precedence is already set to protect artists. And I have one more question for Romy after you. I'll address that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very small industry that it can legislate itself, right? I mean, that's slightly easier to do, but obviously when you're talking about an entire entertainment industry and sector, it's a lot more difficult to have those rights enforced on people. And I think that a lot of these companies probably don't want those more expansive nil rights, and they're quite happy with the grey that we're in currently.
So I just want to follow up with that. All of us are connected to the internet, and Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, ByteDance, they're taking our data and they're exploiting it for profits without paying us. So I think what we need is a digital bill of rights that gives all of us connected to the internet, naming our NIL rights to our own personal images, because they're being exploited along with everybody else's. So, and then regarding AI ethics, all the apps today are infused with AI. So we see the LA trial right now with social media going on, and there's a big part of that trial missing. We're only holding the platform developers liable, but nobody's holding the advertising industry liable for fueling the problem. And I just wanted to get your take on that the advertisers are actually the ones who are fueling it. If you don't have advertising dollars, you don't have addictive technology.
Yeah, and I think the reverse of that is that the internet is free and advertising funds it.
The internet isn't free. We pay for it on our smartphones.
That's
all
deep.
These apps, we pay for subscription. Also, all the data mining has taken place over FCC infrastructure, which is protected by public trust and obligation laws.
Yeah.
So it's just food for thought in terms of
Thank
digital
you.
rights.
We appreciate your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eliana Cotter. I'm a senior in college actually right now, and I found the panel really interesting. I actually have a question for Alex. I was paying attention to the part you were talking about policy and how you guys are trying to avoid that kind of route for the conversation with music creators, and I respect that it's very slow, but I think a lot of the music industry is very focused on policy as a route because of how it's legitimized the industry in the past. How do you navigate creating trustworthy partnerships when you're trying to avoid the policy channel? Because I really respect that you guys are super big into partnering with music creators and partnering with the rights owners. But obviously, if they want to talk about policy and they want that route, how do you navigate around that to create trust so that it can benefit both of your purposes?
Thanks so much. When we're a young company that stepped into music last year.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Into an industry that has existed forever and that's super complex and very singular. So like when I'm in conversation with people in the industry, I know that I'm on their turf.
Yeah.
And whatever issues that they need us to deal with in the contracting process, whatever the sort of landmines that they need to make sure to avoid, we try to be a partner in working with them to help them do that. So I don't think we avoid those issues. If we want to work collaboratively with the music industry, we have to take those issues head on right with them.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello there. I'm Andrew. I'm from the firm Kronberger Rosenfeld. We're a California firm. So this is a question for Nick. I do a fair amount of right of publicity practice. You had touched on the extent to which the United Kingdom does or does not have a right of publicity law. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your analog is on your side of the pond, and just curious the extent to which you feel like that's effective for AI.
Well, we don't really have one. I mean, it's a mix of confidentiality, laws, and trademark and things like that. The closest thing we have is something called passing off, which is effectively like an unregistered trademark, where you have to prove there's goodwill. So that really only protects famous people, frankly. That you use it, that you use your face or an image to actually create to sell products, or to there's a reason why you need to protect it as almost like a business. That there's been some kind of misrepresentation of that, and that there's some damage. But it's extremely and historically very difficult claim to prove, and it's not really designed for name, image, and likeness. It was designed for businesses to protect their products and their brands. So it's definitely not sufficient to capture what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so you guys are really just relying on trademark law.
Pretty much.
To protect that. Very interesting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rithik. Wear a bunch of different hats in this industry. I'm running NYU's Gen Audio and AI group, and I'm advising a few companies building in the space, especially around IP protection. And so one question that I have, I guess for everybody, is in the context of consumer perception, what do you find important to understand about how people are actually, receiving these outputs? And, how does that determine what we do in the next few years?
Who wants to take that?
Thanks, Rithik. So you're talking about the consumer of the AI output or the customer?
I guess it would be both, but let's say, the consumer of the AI output and, anybody who, I guess, in turn, anybody who may say oh, this sounds like my work.
So, I mean, I think that your average consumer is not super attuned to the IP issues that we're grappling with as companies. As I said, just to go back to music, we partnered with industry, haven't gotten sued, went about things that way. I don't think your average consumer really cares that much. Businesses do, and we're an enterprise-focused company that's going after businesses. But I think your average consumer is not really thinking about these IP issues. Rights holders who might say that sounds a little bit like me, or that looks like something I would have created, are obviously extremely attuned to this. And I think from our perspective, it comes back to those guardrails and putting measures in place to not have outputs that look or sound exactly like something that the rights holder created.
I'm very sorry, but I think we might have run out of time for more questions. I apologize, but please join me in thanking the panel. Thank you. Thank you.